Sorry about that. Okay, so we are going to be talking about development permits, state and federal, and some of the things that local floodplain administrators should be doing. So I have with me here today, I have Julius Lockhart, FEMA Region 4 rep, my partner in crime, that always helps me with floodplain management statewide. All right. So what we would like to do is for each of you that are attending today to type in the chat box your name, first name, last name, email address, and the community you represented. Failure to do so will result in not receiving credit for the webinar. And then if you would like a certificate, please email me and just say, hey, Amy, I'd like a certificate. Okay. So with that, we'll get started. So today we're going to talk about three various elements when you think about the permitting process. The first one is talking about the local community, what your responsibilities are, some of the permits that you should be issuing locally. We'll also be talking about state permits, some of the state permits from Army Corps of Engineers and TDEC, and then we'll also be talking about federal permits. We're talking about ones from TVA. So a lot of times when I go out and I do visits and I do audits, one thing that I always get a question is I talk about what kind of state and federal permits are local communities obtaining. And a lot of times people look at me as if I'm crazy and or weird or whatever, and they go, I don't know. And so we kind of wanted to do this to kind of talk about some of the permits you should be requesting, some of them you should be receiving for various types of projects that are in the floodplain, and then to kind of give you guys a list of some of those and some of the contacts to get assistance. So we're going to be going through that today. So for the local responsibilities, we're going to talk about floodplain determination, whether a property is in or out of a special flood hazard area, obtaining a floodplain development permit, and then some different types of other local permits. So the first one is floodplain determination. So one of the biggest things that we recommend folks to do when it comes to floodplain management is looking at the FEMA flood insurance rate map, and then entering a parcel number, a property address to determine if it's in a special flood hazard area or not. So as you can see here from this map, that the unshaded area is a zone X. The blue shaded area could be a zone A or zone AE. And then we have our beloved candy cane area. This is a floodway. So again, first thing when someone comes into your office and you're the floodplain administrator, you're the permit tech, you're the mayor, whoever is the floodplain administrator, first thing to do is to get the property location. And in Tennessee, we're really blessed because we do have parcel lines on the map. So you don't have to sit there with a ruler and try to determine whether or not the distance of where the floodplain is versus where the development is going to go. And then down here on the bottom is the FEMA Map Service Center website. So when you guys look at this presentation later and when it's sent to you, there are what I call live links where you can click on some of this information and get exactly to where you need to go. So this is an example. We had a technical call a few weeks ago from Cannon County, where if you looked at the FEMA flood insurance rate map or the FEMA National Flood Hazard Layer, you can see the pin here shows that the property is outside the special flood hazard area. So you think, okay, it's in zone X, right? I don't have no worries, no problems. But actually, if you look here on the left-hand side, when we looked at the Tennessee property viewer, there is an unmapped stream. So with this unmapped stream here, the property owner has to make sure that the development that's encroaching that unmapped stream is moved, or else they do an engineering analysis. So it's always good to make sure that you look at the FEMA Map Service Center website, if it is a Zone X, to look at the Tennessee property viewer. And then also, you know, sometimes you may have to go out and drive by a site just to see what's going on, because sometimes surveyors do a really good job of putting everything on a site plan. Others may not be necessarily aware, they're just in a hurry and they may accidentally omit information. So you want to make sure that you kind of do your due diligence to make sure that your site plans are showing the nature and location of any kind of drainage facilities and existing and proposed development. So for the National Flood Insurance Program, one of the basic criteria of the program is to have the definition of development. Because if we're talking about floodplain and we have all these additional requirements for development that's in a special flood hazard area, whether it's in a zone AE, zone A, floodway area, there's certain standards and criteria that have to be met. So whenever a community decides to participate in the National Flood Insurance Program, they have to pass a resolution of intent stating that they want to participate in the program. And it's kind of like a quid pro quo, right? You're going to give me something, I'm going to give you something. So FEMA, as a result of a community voluntarily participating, will give the community flood insurance, disaster assistance. And then on the flip side, with having flood insurance and disaster assistance, the community agrees to participate in the program to enforce uniformly floodplain regulations for their community. So one of the main pillars of the program is the definition of development, right? If you're a brand new floodplain administrator, we have in the Tennessee floodplain management permitting guide, we have on the cheat sheet, we have within the ordinance or resolution, the definition of development. So the definition of development is any kind of man-made change to improved or unapproved real estate. So you could have a vacant piece of property, you could have a property that already has development on it. It's including but not limited to buildings, other structures like a she shed, accessory structure, mining, dredging, filling, grading, paving. So I always give the example as if I ever had a bakery and let's say it was Miller Bakery and it was really well received and I didn't have enough parking and it was in the floodplain and I need to extend the parking lot and it's in the floodplain, I'm going to come in and get a permit for filling, grading, and paving, right? A lot of people don't think about that. Or if I'm putting in a new road for development, that's considered development in the NFIP, as well as excavating, drilling operations, storage of equipment or materials. So sometimes you'll see it where you have different lots where they have storage of equipment and materials. It has to be anchored and elevated so that it doesn't collapse or float during a flood event, because a lot of times, like when the Waverly flood happened, if people would have had their address on the back of a shed and it hit my house, and I could have figured out the damage that was caused. So again, you want to make sure that all these things are addressed when you have your permit. So another thing that we've also had is a Tennessee floodplain management permitting guide. You can see down here that there is a link to that. So on the left-hand side, I kind of joke and say that there's a dinosaur and then there's a Jetsons, right? So for some of you guys that just like something simple and easy to understand, there's the Word version here on the left-hand side where you can just go in and fill that out and check it off. And then on the right-hand side, if you're more of the Jetsons and you have a little bit more sophistication, or your community is going all digital on forms, you can have the PDF here on the right-hand side. It's a fillable PDF. And these are just kind of a baseline to document what's going on. So a lot of times that when I go out, when Julius goes out, or when we go out together to communities, one of the biggest things that we see that's an area that needs improvement is administrative procedures, right? Because a lot of times you guys maybe in the past didn't have a permit, didn't know you needed to have a permit. And so what we really try to do with this permitting guide is to have everything that you would ever need to know: how to make a floodplain determination, what's the sample permit look like, how do I review that permit, and if I get an elevation certificate, what do I need to look at? So then there's different development standards within that document. So I would encourage you guys, if you don't have a copy of that, even though we sent it out last September, we've had a webinar on it. It's on the YouTube channel. If you're brand new to floodplain management, one of the things I would encourage you to do is to watch those videos on the permitting guide, and even come to the intro to floodplain management class in the future that we're having, or the L273. There's other local permits that communities can have beyond floodplain management. Some communities have a building permit, some have a sign permit, a fence permit, or an accessory structure. So again, one of the things I would encourage you to do if you are a floodplain administrator and you have other offices that issue permits is to kind of talk to one another to kind of have a coordinated effort. Because sometimes, let's say that I'm the permit tech and I'm going to make a floodplain determination and I get some of the materials and Julius is the building inspector. We should have a good relationship to be able to talk and say, I have this development happening. This is what they have on the permit application. These are some of the standards that have to be met, but kind of talking to one another, right? Because it's really important to have a coordinated effort because sometimes things can fall through the cracks. Or let's say, for instance, that I'm the public works department and I have a project that let's say I'm building a new bridge. I'm replacing a bridge over a stream. I don't know that I'm supposed to talk to the local floodplain administrator. I'm just going to go out and replace that bridge. Having a coordinated effort is really important because if you are the floodplain administrator, you should not be the best kept secret in your local government or for your citizens or other stakeholders. Floodplain management is important. So I'd encourage you guys to take the time to talk to other departments to make sure that everybody's on the same page because it is really important. So the next part of this is what I found to be kind of fun is talking about state permits. So whenever I took over this job, there's a lot of things in my mind of things that I want to do for Tennessee, right? So we have the Certified Floodplain Surveyor Program. We have the Floodplain Management Permitting Guide where we kind of are going through administrative procedures. We have the monthly webinars. So I feel like we're kind of on a good path. But this was one of the things that when I sat down and when we do audits or when we do visits, we talk about state and federal permits, most communities would look at me and go, oh no. So I really wanted to kind of drill down to see what permits communities should be requesting, what agencies they should be reaching out to, what are some of the requirements, what are some of the fees, who are the contact people. Because like a lot of times whenever there's the word flooding, no matter where it's at, whether it's in a floodplain, out of a floodplain, let's say it's a stormwater issue, everybody calls Amy, right? Everybody calls me, right? I'm one of the most popular people in Tennessee government because everybody calls. Like we were working yesterday and my phone was ringing off the hook all day. So what we want to do is give you some of the resources that you're able to make sure that certain permits are obtained and making sure that even beyond floodplain requirements, other environmental concerns are being addressed locally. That way you have the documentation. Because if you are the permit person, if you are the floodplain administrator, and let's say a citizen is upset about something, the best feeling in the world is to have the documentation in the file to be able to say, yes, all the I's are dotted, T's are crossed when it comes to obtaining permits. So what we want to do is kind of equip you guys today with that information so that you can have this presentation, you can have this documentation, you can have the website that has all the information on there so that when somebody comes in, a little light bulb goes off and goes, I need to get a couple other permits for this. So Julius and I went through this yesterday and enjoyed talking about it and learned some new things. So one of the first things to think about when you're thinking about environmental permits is the Tennessee Department of Environment and Conservation, right? There's 8 regional offices. As you can see right here, there's a toll-free number, and then there's a website where you can click on each one of these offices and get information, okay? So this is a link here you guys can click on to see that. And then when you click on that, you can also see a map. So you can see the coverage areas based upon what county you're in for this within the state of Tennessee. There's 8 regional offices that can help you. So you have questions, there's a 1-800 number, there's the Ask TDEC, and then you have the 8 different regional offices. You have addresses and phone numbers. Okay. So that should be pretty easy. If you've never reached out to your TDEC regional office, you may want to just to know the staff and to meet folks. I know a few of the the directors for some of the regional offices, they are really responsive and helpful to many communities, and they want to make sure that things are going well. So if you have questions, this is on the website that you can look at. So the first thing we're going to talk about is waste permit. So there's a variety of permits we're going to be talking about today. There's some of these permits, and I'm sure some of you have never ever thought about. There was one or two that Julius and I kind of had an aha moment yesterday, like, wow, people aren't getting permits for certain things. So we're going to go through these with the contact information and different things. That way you guys can have them. So I know one of the first ones that we have here is commercial compost permits. So a composting facility can be exempt from permitting if you're composting your own material on your own property. Okay. Or if it's for agricultural purposes at another agribusiness, if you're an agribusiness. And you're also exempt if you're composting 400 cubic yards or less per year of yard trimmings or materials, or if you are composting 100 cubic yards or less per year of food scraps or similar material using an in-vessel composting method. So those are the ones that are exempt. You go, okay. And then the ones that will require permits is a composting facility processing over 400 cubic yards per year, or similar material may apply for a permit by rule. And then composting facilities processing more than 100 cubic yards per year of food scraps or similar material using in-vessel composting methods. So it kind of has those measurements here. Are you over 400 cubic yards? You're going to have a permit. If it's more than 100 cubic yards of food scraps or similar materials, you will have to have a permit. So it is a permit by rule. There's a form to submit, and then a new facility can't begin construction until you fill out parts 1 and 2, right? So part 1 is completing the CN form 1036. You have to have a topographic work map and a disclosure statement. And then for part 2, you have to have a hydrogeologic assessment of the potential site, a facility design plans and operations manual, financial assurance, and then other requirements for tier 1 or tier 2 and tier 3 composting facilities. So again, there's additional information on these websites. We could sit here probably for hours or a whole day or more going through all these. But again, it's kind of reminds you of floodplain management, right? You've got to have an application form, you got to have a topographic work map, and you have to have assurances, design plans, operation manual for this facility. These are some of the forms that you have to have, the permit by rule, and then the application. And then you also have to have an annual report for composting facilities. If you have questions, or if you ever have somebody that's coming in your community that wants to do this type of facility, Robert Wadley is the contact person for TDEC. So the next one, we're going to talk about hazardous waste management permits, right? Who needs them? Any person owning or operating a new or existing facility that treats, stores, or disposes of hazardous waste must obtain a permit from the division of TDEC's Division of Solid Waste Management. And then there's certain processes that are regulated and require a permit. So different types of permit examples is treatment processes, where you have tanks, surface impoundments, incinerators, boilers. If you have a disposal process, if you have landfills, or if you have storage processes where you have waste piles, surface impoundments, drip pads, other storage methods, or if you have a miscellaneous processes where you have open burning, open detonation units for propellants, explosives, pyrotechnics, so on and so forth, or if you're going to have microwave destruction. So again, those are the 4 different types for hazardous waste that you would need to have a permit. So they're also issued for research and development, land treatment, demonstrations, and emergencies. There's certain activities that are not required to obtain a hazardous waste permit. So a person is covered by permit by rule if it's publicly owned treatment works, if there's a Resource Conservation Recovery Act exemptions, or if there's a conditionally exempt small quantity generators or farmers can be exempt. And then persons who conduct treatment or containment activities during immediate response to a discharge of a hazardous waste. If there's imminent and substantial threat of discharge of that hazardous waste, or discharge of a material which, when discharged, could become hazardous. So again, if that's a life-threatening or an emergency situation, they don't have to worry about a permit. You have to just be able to respond and clean up the mess, right? So again, there's part A, there's an application, and then part B, there's a checklist, making sure that you have a topographic work map, description of the treatment, storage, disposal process, seismic information. Look, floodplain considerations. So again, floodplain management is important. They want to know whether or not hazardous waste materials and activities are going to be in a floodplain. A waste analysis plan, a copy of that. And again, that's going to detail the chemical and physical characteristics of the waste and residues to be handled, a description of the procedures to prevent the hazards, what kind of security are you going to have and equipment, what's the inspection schedule look like, preparedness and prevention, general hazard prevention, and then even having personnel training. So again, it kind of goes back to when we talk about flood proofing, that you have to have an operations plan and a maintenance plan, that there should be somebody designated for these activities, and that should be a yearly routine training, and then a description of the procedures, the structures, and the equipment used to prevent releases to the environment. So again, there's additional part of the checklist to make sure that you're not going to have accidental ignition or reaction of ignitable, reactive, or incompatible waste, a contingency plan for emergency operations, a facility closure plan if something were to happen. How's that going to close? What's that going to look like? Closure costs and financial assurance documents, and then consideration for protection of groundwater and surface water. And then the owners and operators have to submit unit-specific information for each hazardous waste unit in the facility. So again, there is an application fee. There's other non-annual review fees. There can be variances or waivers. So again, there's other things with that. And then there's also an annual maintenance fee for the storage and treatment fees and all that good stuff. So again, if someone is coming into your community and they want to have a hazardous waste facility, they have to have this permit. They have to detail the who, what, where, when, and why, and pay fees every year. And then again, there's a division of solid waste management. This is a phone number, email address, fax number. And you can also contact your environmental field office for your county to get additional information. Again, I know that they would probably walk you through the application and then making sure that the checklist is completed before that permit is issued for the facility. So landfill permit. So again, this is another one from the TDEC Division of Solid Waste Management. They are required for various types of disposal activities. Class 1 is non-hazardous municipal solid waste, such as household waste, approved special waste, and commercial waste. Class 2 is non-hazardous industrial waste, commercial waste, and fill. Class 3 takes class 4 waste plus landscaping, land clearing, farming waste, and class 4 disposal takes construction demolition waste, shredded tires, and waste with similar characteristics. So again, these facilities are covered by permit by rule. You can't have junkyards and other exempted solid waste disposal facilities or practices are not required to obtain a landfill permit. So again, you have those 4 types up above. Again, if they're doing municipal waste, agricultural, industrial, if they're doing tires or, demolition activities, they do have to have a permit. So again, a person that wants to have a landfill in a community has to fill out a solid waste part 1 application, that's CN-1036. And they have to have, again, contact information, what the proposed activities are going to be at the facility, and then whether or not the facility is subject to approval and county approval if necessary. So again, if somebody's coming in, a lot of times when these facilities are going into different communities, people are upset about it. And so I'm sure there'll probably be county meetings, county commission meetings, there'd be legislative action to whether or not approve this in a community. So there would be meetings, and also a topographic work map showing the facility and the property boundaries to half a mile past the boundaries of it. So again, you would have a radius of a half a mile out of how many homes would be impacted. And then each waste processing or disposal unit, wells, springs, other surface water bodies within that, they'd be concerned about environmental impacts. And then having this applicant disclosure statement 1306, again, talking about past performance and waste management fields of the applicant, officers, partners, so on and so forth. So they would want to know if someone had operated a facility before. What's your past performance? Have there been any issues, violations, concerns that would have to be documented as well? And then part 2, hydrogeologic assessment of the site. Again, having a facility design and operations manual, financial assurance, and then documenting exactly what specific class you're going to be getting that permit. And then a new facility cannot begin construction without submitting parts 1 and 2 and receiving an effective permit. So again, having all your I's dotted, T's crossed to make sure. And again, even if they were having a landfill on a property, again, you'd want to know whether or not it's in a floodplain. And if it was, you would be getting a permit for that. And then there's also the permit application. This is just a link here to be able to click on that. And then someone can modify an existing permit. So let's say that the permittee wants to operate or construct differently than is shown and described in the engineering permit drawings and narrative descriptions of the facility. So again, modifications can be deemed major or minor and have to be formally requested to the department prior to the implementation. So then there's a permit modification page that you can click on to get the paperwork if somebody needed that. Then there's various kind of fees based upon what class you are. So for class 1 and class 2 and hydrogeologic plan, $4,000. Class 1 and class 2 design and construction plan, $6,000. Class 3 and class 4, $3,000. And then if you're going to do a major modifications, $2,000. So there are fees and application filings that have this form here of 0934. So again, the maintenance fee based upon what class and how many tons per year, you can see this below. It's a nice chunk of change. And then if you're a class 2, there's various levels, class 3 and class 4. There's different fees for that. So again, applications and further assistance are through the Division of Solid Waste Management. And again, if someone needs more than one permit, they can contact the Environmental Field Office for further assistance. So used oil management. This is one that maybe a lot of times people don't necessarily think about, but it does. You have to file a registration or notification for used oil management. All used oil management permits are permit by rule, meaning that the facility operation and maintenance standards are established by regulations and not developed for facilities on an individual basis. So applicants can either use a registration or notification forms to apply for approval to operate a used oil management facility in Tennessee. Transporters also submit additional documentation for certification, and then used oil generators are not required to complete the application. However, they are accountable for meeting generator standards and the regulations. And then if you have used oil collection centers are only required to register. All other facilities, including transporters, transfer facilities, processors, so on and so forth, must complete the notification process. And then the transporters must provide additional documentation to become certified, and all other information provided to the program prior to the facility operation. So again, it's like what we always talk about floodplain management. You have to ask for permission first before you start development, before you start one of these facilities. All this documentation has to be submitted. And again, facilities using a notification must submit an application to EPA ID number if they don't already have one. for the physical location of the facility, and then there's various forms that they have to fill out. So there are fees required. There is a one-time fee of $150 for each EPA ID number that's issued for transporters, transfer facilities, processors, re-refiners, marketers, and burners of off specification used oil, and used oil transporters, transfer facilities, processors, and re-refiners must pay an annual maintenance fee. So again, TDEC does have it with the environmental field offices for information about management standards. And then there is the contact of Nina Vo in the central office that can also help with used oil. So water permits. Water permits are kind of fun because sometimes people, when we're talking about different kind of development, they don't always think about floodplain management. So you'll see sometimes where we have in here about, hey, what about floodplain management? So water permits. We have the National Pollutant Discharge Elimination System, the NPDES, and that is for persons discharging pollutants directly from point sources into surface waters of the state. They have to obtain NPDES discharge permit from the Tennessee Division of Water Resources. And all programs under the NPDES stormwater program to include construction, industrial. And then one thing that a lot of times people talk about, or citizens have questions, they say, is my community MS4, right? So I actually wrote out what that is, because the M and then there's 4 S's. So you have municipal separate storm sewer system, right? That's the MS4. And then there's also the Tennessee qualifying local program at the QLP. So just so you guys know, some of the stuff that we were looking at for this presentation had the alphabet soup, a little bit of language, a little bit of acronyms. And so we weren't sure what they are. So I made sure that I wrote all these out. That way you guys would know, because if you're looking at it later and someone says, okay, what's the MS for? I don't remember, but it's actually listed on this slide. So who needs an NPDES permit? Again, like we talked about before, persons discharging pollutants directly from point sources into surface waters. Again, industries sending wastewater to public sewers called publicly owned treatment works, POTW, are considered indirect dischargers, and they do not need an NPDES discharge. However, there's industries that should obtain a permit from their local publicly owned treatment works, and then their standards and requirements are specified in local sewer ordinances. So again, if you are a person that does a lot of permitting in your community, or let's say I'm a planner and I have a stormwater regulations or different things in my community, I should be looking at that to make sure that that's being done. And then industries that discharge to a publicly owned treatment work must contact their municipality to obtain a discharge permit. And then you have to have plans for treatment works, have to be prepared by an engineer licensed in the state of Tennessee, and it should be approved by the Division of Water Resources prior to construction. So there are permit fees that can range from $250 up to $1,500, depending upon the design flow, capacity of the facility, or the size of a mining site in acres. And then these fees are due at application. And again, there's maintenance fees that can either be minimal to $10,380, depending upon the volume of the discharge, the size of the distribution in acres on a mining site, and the standard industrial classification code of the facility. So again, applications can be obtained from the Division of Water Resources. New applicants who need more than one permit should contact the environmental field office. And then the applicants that are seeking coverage under a general or individual ARAP, right? ARAP, Aquatic Resource Alteration Permit, for activities with NPDES permits for mining related discharges, or a surface mining permit, mineral test hole permit, coverage under the TMSP Sector J, or the rock harvesting general permit. See, there's all these different kind of permits, guys. And so if someone's going to be doing some of these things, your best bet is to talk to the environmental field office, right? So electronic application submittals and requests for information regarding mining related activities can go to tdec.mining@tn.gov. So what is stormwater? So stormwater, this is a question that we get a lot of. A lot of times people will have a flooding concern and it's in a zone X, is outside the floodplain, but they're having a flooding condition. So a lot of times lately, the phone calls have been more about this than anything else. So stormwater runoff is generated from rain and snow melt events that flow over land or impervious surfaces such as paved streets, parking lots, building rooftops, and does not soak into the ground. The runoff picks up pollutants like trash, chemicals, oils, dirt, sediment that can harm rivers, streams, lakes, wetlands. And then to protect these resources, communities, construction companies, industries, developers use stormwater controls, best known as best management practices, BMPs, and then they're supposed to reduce pollutants and prevent pollution by controlling it as at its source. So the one thing to think about, a lot of times in communities you have the floodplain management regulations and you have the stormwater management regulations, and sometimes they don't talk to one another, right? They don't complement one another. So one of the communities that I was talking to a while ago, they're rewriting their regulations, but for their stormwater, their design standards are only for a 25-year event. But then they had a kind of a clause in their regulations that if it was in a floodplain, that they had to design to the 100-year event. So in my mind, as communities continue to grow in Tennessee, the design standards really should be to the 100-year event, because as we see with weather patterns changing, whether you call it global warming, whether you call it more flash flooding, whatever you want to call it, there's more flood events in Tennessee, right? And as we continue to grow, as we continue to go from pervious, where water can trickle down to the water table, to impervious, where we just, make it asphalt heaven and have more rooftops, more roads, maybe not as much curb and gutter. If we're relying on these stormwater resources and these facilities to take away that water, are they really being designed to reflect what's happening in the community when there's rain events? And sometimes over time, when you have large subdivisions, maybe the engineer did not design the facilities correctly, or maybe there's adjacent development to that that is causing more flooding in the area. And then it comes down to where citizens are super upset because their properties are flooding and culverts and different things are undersized. So some communities will do a hazard mitigation grant if it's on public property, to revise stormwater facilities. If it's on private property or from a private development, it's a little bit harder to try to go and fix those facilities, because if the developer has sold off all the lots and has moved out of the area and doesn't work in the area anymore, or was done 20 or 30 years ago, it's much harder for folks to try to uh, fix these problems, because it is costly and it does take a lot of time. So again, there is NPDES stormwater. There is a stormwater program that regulates stormwater discharges from 3 potential sources. So we have our MS4, the municipal separate storm sewer systems, construction activities, and industrial activities. So operators of these sources are required to obtain coverage under an NPDES permit before they can discharge stormwater. So again, you have to ask for permission first before you do development, and then make sure the permitting mechanism is designed to prevent stormwater runoff from washing harmful pollutants into local surface waters. So again, federal, state, local governments have passed laws and regulations to address these problems. So there's phase 1 EPA stormwater regulations that were initiated through a national stormwater permitting program in 1990. And they applied to industrial activities, construction sites of 5 acres or more, and to urban runoff from larger cities. Phase 2 was done in 1999 to address additional urbanized areas, and then certain cities with populations over 10,000 and construction activities of 1 to 5 acres. And then the Tennessee Department of Environment and Conservation Water Resources implements these 2 phases of regulations in Tennessee. So again, it's not just 5 acres or more. Now it's 1 to 5 acres. So again, if you have development that's coming into your community and you need help, make sure you reach out to the Division of Water Resources for help. So again, what are MS4 communities? It was in response to the 1987 amendments of the Clean Water Act through the US EPA. And then they developed the phase 1 of the NPDES in 1990. Again, making sure that you have coverage for stormwater discharges for medium and large municipal separate storm sewer systems, where it's in incorporated places or counties with populations of 100,000 or more. And then phase 2 is for smaller MS4s. So there are about 100 cities and counties that are required to obtain coverage under this. So I just want to show you guys this real quick. So you can kind of see here, if you say, okay, you got a list of 100, Amy, am I on here? You can actually, it's alphabetical, where it has all the different cities and stuff. So you have Alcoa. All these are phase 2, so these are smaller communities, and then you have the phase 1 of Nashville, Memphis, Chattanooga, Knoxville. So you have all this under here. So if you guys ever have a question and you're just wondering after this, you can look at this. Okay. So then we have stormwater permitting info for construction, industrial, and MS4, and for Tennessee qualifying local programs. There are different kind of permitting for that. And then if you want more information for that, you can contact the TDEC Environmental Office. But I just want to show you guys for the Tennessee qualifying local program. This is for phase 2, streamlining and coordination of that. And then it has different information on here. And then if you are a participant, there's contact information here. So there are a few communities: Bristol, Cleveland, Cookeville, Franklin, Kingsport, Knoxville, Washington County. There's information on here that you guys can take a look at. And then it also has your stormwater manager, their email address, and then it has information on here about what some of the standards are for that. So again, plans and review for public water systems. So there are some different types of plans accepted through the portal. So you can have preliminary engineering reports, construction drawings, engineering reports or calculations for treatment projects, and then final construction documents having the final drawings and plans, specifications, and reports and calculations. And then you can go through Division of Water Resources so dwr.engineering@tn.gov. And then if you have questions for public water systems, you can reach out to Timothy Hill. So then if you're going to review it, this is it as well for the plans. And then the next one that we have is ARAP, right? So when I came to Tennessee, I did planning in my past life in a beautiful state that's round on the ends and high in the middle, Ohio. And we didn't necessarily get so much into ARAP permits, right? We just did planning, didn't have zoning. So there were some standards, but not a lot. So I wasn't really that familiar with ARAP when I first came here. But the ARAP is also known as a Section 401 permit, and it's for persons who wish to make alteration to a stream, river, lake, or wetland. Now, I kind of bolded this when it talks about alteration of a stream, because one of the things that's in the local flood damage prevention regulations, if there's going to be any kind of alteration to a stream, my office is supposed to be made aware of it, right? And I like surprises when it comes to my personal life, but I don't like surprises when it comes professionally. So if someone is altering a stream and they get a 401 permit, there's also things that they need to do for floodplain management, which we'll get into a little bit, right? So if they're doing any kind of physical alterations to properties of waters of the state, they have to acquire an ARAP permit. And then examples, and this kind of ties in with floodplain management, right? So dredging, excavation, channel widening or straightening, bank sloping, stabilization, if they're relocating a channel, if there's water diversions or withdrawals, if there's dams, weirs, dikes, levees, other similar structures, flooding, excavating, again, floodplain, draining, filling a wetland, road and utility crossings, and structural fill. So these are all things that if someone comes in and they say, hey, I got to get a 401 permit, they should also be thinking about floodplain management and are they doing an engineering analysis? So it all kind of ties in together. And to me, it's kind of like peas and carrots, right? That they go really well together. And if someone is getting a 401 permit, they should be getting a floodplain permit, right? So again, there's additional considerations with this. So it is a federal permit, may be required by the Army Corps of Engineers for projects that include the discharge of dredge or fill materials into the waters of the U.S., including wetlands. And this permit is called a 404 permit. So when you have a 401 or 404 permit is required by the Corps, a 401 certification has to be obtained from the division. And then a 401 certification affirms that the discharge would not violate Tennessee's water quality standards. And then there's an application process for that, which is the same as the ARAP process. So again, general permits are developed and maintained by the division to provide a streamlined, expedited means of authorizing projects that are singularly or cumulatively proposed minor projects that impact water resources. So again, whether it's a 401, 404, floodplain should be part of the dream team, right? So whether it's just getting the 401 and the floodplain or getting the 401, 404, there should also be floodplain permits and making sure that if there's going to be a stream alteration or relocation, that's reflected through an engineering analysis and then through a letter of map revision to FEMA to make sure, because it may be one of those things that you have a stream and you're relocating it. And let's say, for instance, I'm zigzagging and all of a sudden I just want to go straight. Maybe because the zigzag is now being straightened, some of the homes that were in the floodplain may be removed. And so you want to update those maps because if there's future development in your community, someone's using outdated information and they're not really able to assess their true flood risk. Or if I'm paying for flood insurance and all of a sudden now my home went from a zone AE to an X, I could get a reduced rate for my flood insurance policy, but because no one has revised the maps, I'm stuck paying that flood insurance premium, a higher premium, because the maps haven't been updated. So again, you guys can see, because sometimes people say to me, well, I got my 401, I don't need to do anything else, right? So again, if there's any kind of encroachments, fill, new construction, substantial improvements, or other development within an adopted regulatory floodway, there has to be an H&H study, a hydraulic analysis performed in accordance with standard engineering practice to make sure that it's not going to increase flood levels within the community. So again, there needs to be an engineering analysis submitted, reviewed, and approved prior to the commencement of development activity in a Zone AE with floodway, Zone AE without floodway, Zone A, or unmapped streams. So, sometimes we get excuses where they don't want to necessarily do the floodplain side of the coin. So I kind of put that Mr. T in there about quit your jibba jabba. And then we talk about septic permits, have a construction permit. So you want to have the installation of subsurface sewage disposal septic systems on your property, or to repair an existing a faulty system. So there has to be a septic installer, pumper, and land disposal permits. So if you're installing, you're altering, you're extending, or repairing a septic system, or if you're removing and disposing of a domestic septic or septage from septic tanks, holding tanks, portable toilets, or other similar sewage treatment or disposal facilities, or if there's land disposal, domestic septage from septic tanks or other sewage treatment or disposal facilities. So again, you want to think about when there's septic systems, making sure you get a permit. And for floodplain, during a flash flood event, The ground can become saturated, preventing the system from working properly, or the system could collapse or float out of position. So again, whenever we're talking about when you're having development in the floodplain, where we have a site plan that's showing the nature and location of existing or proposed development, if you can try to get a septic system out of the floodplain, it's more desirable, because if it does fail, it is going to stink in more ways than one. And then septic system resources. Some counties provide groundwater protection services for their own areas, and there are online application form is not to be submitted for services requested in the following communities. So you can see here, you've got Blount County, Davidson County, Hamilton County, Jefferson County, Knox County, Madison, Sevier, Shelby, Williamson counties, that they kind of do their own permitting. So again, you would click on these if you're in these areas to obtain that information. And then if you are in need of a septic system services in any of these counties, you're going to click on that. But if it's not in those, you're going to contact your local environmental field office. So biosolids. So exactly what is a biosolid? So a biosolid is generated during the treatment of domestic sewage in a wastewater treatment works, right? So there are standards, there are requirements for contaminant limits, management practices, and operational standards. So I guess I'll tell this story. My twin sister, when she went to work where she's at, she was over stormwater, and they said, okay, Jen, let's take you on a tour of a sewer plant. And so she didn't realize how bad it was, and she wore these shoes, and when she got home, her shoes smelled pretty bad, so she had to get rid of them. So I kind of laughed because my sister's kind of girly, and I told her, I said, well, your job really stinks. So anyway, hopefully you guys are giggling. All right. So there are standards and the rules for biosolids that are applied to the land. There's also rules for pathogen and alternative vector attraction reduction requirements for biosolids. And then there is a general permit that authorizes a land application for non-exceptional quality biosolids within the state of Tennessee. And it does not apply to facilities that incinerate sewage sludge, dispose of sewage sludge in a landfill, or place sewage sludge in a surface disposal site. So again, this is some of the information here where you have to have a signed copy of a notice of intent and have the necessary attachments. And then if you have contact information, you can contact Anastasia Sharp. So another thing to think about, there's some communities that are very rural in nature. So sometimes what you have is a confined animal feeding operation. And so as part of public chapter number 523 that became effective on July 1st, 2018, there's a new law that reduces the number of animal feeding operations that are required to apply for permit coverage in Tennessee. So if you have a large animal feeding operation, maybe before they start development, that you reach out to John Newberry to see if it would even be allowed. So there's mineral test hole permit, where a person who drills any hole in excess of 100 feet for the purpose of exploring for minerals, excluding oil and gas, must obtain a permit from the Tennessee Division of Water Resources Mining Unit. So there are an application. So again, there has to be fees that are done before any activity. They have to have a notarized application for the permit to drill a mineral test hole. They also have to have an organization report, and then they have to have a location map, plat map showing the location of all planned test holes on the appropriate topographic map, and then evidence of $1,000 plugging bond per test hole, or a blanket plugging bond of $10,000 for all the test holes under a blanket permit. So again, you're going to contact the TDEC Division of Water Resources for instructions. And then there's also the Knoxville Environmental Field Office for TDEC that has that there. And then applicants are seeking coverage under a general individual aquatic resource alteration permit for activities associated with the NPDES permit for mining related discharges, a surface mining permit, so on and so forth. Have to get an application and submit one to the mining section at the Knoxville office. Electronic submittals and requests for information should be sent to tdec.mining@tn.gov. So again, there's water quality state operating permit. So anyone that's engaged in the operation of a sewage treatment system that does not have a direct discharge to any surface or subsurface waters must obtain a state operating permit from the Tennessee Division of Water Resources. And again, the permit is for wastewater treatment facilities, land applying for spray or drip irrigation, if you're temporarily collecting and holding wastewater, if your operation of a pump and haul system, if there's an operation of a municipal sewage collection system, which discharges into a collection system owned by another entity. And then another one is mobile car wash or other pressure washing operations should be getting a water quality state operating permit. So sometimes we get questions about having a car wash in the floodplain. So this is one of the permits that should be obtained, as well as getting a floodplain development permit. So again, prior to applying for the state operating permit, you have to have a preliminary project discussion should be held with the division, and then requests for a discussion can be sent to division water resources.engineering@tn.gov. So I like this little, I don't know, Julius, if you saw this, but you'll get the joke. So it says all employees trained by Mr. Miyagi.
Wax on,
So,
wax off.
right. So we were having a discussion. We were talking about Mr. Miyagi at dinner the other night. So and then applicants must submit the application for state operating permit at least 180 days before starting any new activity or before the permit expires if renewing a permit. So again, you have to plan ahead, and it has to go to water.permits@tn.gov. So again, the form requires that you have contact information of the applicant, the name and distance to the nearest stream, previous state and federal water quality permits, information regarding the industry's products and processes, and again, a description of the processes from which a wastewater is discharged. And then if there's any kind of detailed information regarding the waste stream entering the treatment system, the source of the water supply, the treatment supply, the sludge disposal, and other general information. And then have an engineering reports, plan specifications should be submitted for approval. So again, if you have questions, you go to water.permits@tn.gov. And if you also have additional other types of permits, contact the TDEC Environmental Field Office. So again, there's also underground injection control point. So if wells injection types are classified, so you can have class 1, you have a deep well that's industrial. Class 2 is oil field brine. Class 3 is mineral extraction. Class 4 is hazardous waste. Class 5 is shallow, non-hazardous. And class 6 is geo sequestration of carbon dioxide. And then anyone who discharges industrial, commercial wastewater or stormwater into subsurface system is required to submit an underground injection control application to the Tennessee Division of Water Resources drinking water unit. And then the operation of a single family domestic waste disposal system requires a construction permit from the Division of Water Resources, but does not require an underground injection control permit. So if someone's doing a single family domestic waste disposal system, they should be going through the Tennessee Division of Water Resources to get a permit. So again, underground injection control permit, if you have one of those classes, you have to go through the Division of Water Resources, the Environmental Field Office as well. And then there's Crit Stendern. I'm probably butchering names today, but anyway, there's his email address, phone number. Wellhead protection plan. So a lot of times there's all public water systems that use groundwater as a source are required to develop a wellhead protection plan and obtain approval for each phase of the plan through the Tennessee Division of Water Supply. And for the purposes of wellhead protection, there's 4 wellhead categories, which we'll go through in a minute. The categories are determined by the number of connections and the amount of water produced. Public water systems that purchase all their water from other regulated systems are not required to obtain a wellhead protection plan approval from the Division of the Water Supply. So again, if they're getting it from someone else, they don't have to, but if they're getting it from a source within their community, they do. So again, the public water, all public water systems have to submit a plan. And then the plan has to include wellhead area delineation, so a geologic designation of the area to be protected, except for the smallest systems. And then there's potential contamination source inventory. You have to indicate where the potential contaminate sources in the wellhead spring location are on a topographic work map and a tabulation of the sources. And then a wellhead protection plan. So you have to have photographs, identify hazardous chemical use and storage. What's the spill response notification going to be like? Contingency planning and steps to protect the area around the wellhead. And then each phase requires an approval from the division. The smallest wellhead category of public water systems like trailer parks, schools, churches submits all material as one plan and not in phases. In addition, each public water system must furnish copies of the wellhead delineation and wellhead protection plan to the county governing body and the County Regional Planning Commission. I would also encourage you guys, if you did get a copy of these plans, to also give them to your emergency management agency or director so that they're aware of where this is at. Because if there is a problem, if there is a spill, if there is a contamination, they should know where the wellhead protection areas are in your community. So again, you get it through the Division of Water Resources, and then new applicants who need more information can contact the Environmental Field Office. And then if you're a well driller or installer, there's a license that needs to be obtained. So for anyone who manages or supervises digging, drilling, re-drilling of a well, or anyone who installs, repairs well pumps or filters and treatment devices should obtain a license. And then there are certain fees that have to be paid before starting any activity. So they have to have an application form that has their contact information on there. They have to have at least a minimum of 2 years experience working in the occupation for the license applied for, and then a list of 10 water well applicants that has constructed in the last 5 years, copies of occupational license or certificates from the previous 2 years, and then application for a licensing examination form. So again, if you're going to do this, the proof is in the pudding. You got to make sure that you have your 2 years of experience, list of some of the water wells that you've constructed in the last 5 years, and then make sure that you have your license and certificates from the last 2 years. So again, if someone wants to do this, there's a form, the CN-1168. There's various fees here. And then they can go through the Division of Water Resources and Environmental Field Office. So surface mining permit. So anyone who engages in mining and surface disturbances related to mining requires a state mining permit, which is obtained from the Tennessee Division of Water Resources mining section. In all counties, mining of the following materials require a permit. So if you're mining for clay, stone, phosphate rock, metallic ore, any other solid material or substance of commercial value found in natural deposits on or in the earth. So it does not include limestone, gravel, sand, chert, marble, coal, or dimension stone. So in Shelby and Davidson counties, a permit is also required for the mining of gravel and sand. And then also for floodplain management, you're going to want to make sure, because mining is part of the definition of development, having a floodplain permit, having a site plan, and then making sure that it's not encroaching the floodplain, floodway, or unmapped streams. So making sure that you have all your I's dotted, T's crossed, and you have that site plan that's drawn out that shows the national flood hazard layer versus where the proposed development is going to be occurring. And then again, there is a little bit of a time period before you can start surface mining. You have to have at least 1 day before filling or filing an application. The applicants are required to publish a notice of intent to surface mine in the newspaper of general circulation in the county where the activity is planned. And then you also have to have a standard form is supplied by the mining section for preparation of the notice. So again, you're not just going to put a notice in a newspaper and say, "Hi, I'm Amy Miller. I'm doing surface mining tomorrow on Quimby Avenue," right? You can't do that. So has to have the mining section will give you that template to put in the newspaper. And then you have to have this shows a date line must be submitted with proper fee and the following. And then there's also Form CN 1097 that has information regarding the applicant, company, the mineral to be mined, the acreage, type of bond to be filed, corporate surety. If you've had any kind of previous permits, property owners that are within 500 feet of the operation, and owners of the surface rights and mineral rights. So again, making sure that you have all your I's dotted, T's crossed, you have all that information whenever you're doing that activity, and making sure that property owners that are within 500 feet of the operation are made aware is really important. So again, also having a U.S. Geologic Survey topographic work map showing the mining location, haul loads, site boundaries has to be done by a surveyor, and then a copy of the NPDES discharge permit or a letter from the Division of Water Resources stating that no discharge will take place and therefore no permit is required. And then in order to have that application for a surface mining permit, you have the Form 1097. So there are fees. There's an application fee. There's an acreage fee, $25 for each acre, up to a maximum of $2,500. There's a performance bond fee, not less than $600 per acre, and can be $2,000 or more depending upon the county. So again, coordinating with everyone to know what the fees are, and then if you want to make any kind of amendment to the application, it's a $50 fee. So this is a contact for surface mining. Again, phone number. If you have questions, if you have a new applicant, they can go through the TDEC Environmental Field Office. And then applicants that are seeking coverage under a general or individual aquatic resource alteration permits for activities associated with NPDES permit for mining related discharges. They have to get the surface mining permit, mineral test hole permit, and then coverage under the TMSP Sector 1 or the rock harvesting general permit, has to submit that to the mining section in Knoxville. So this is one that needs to have more information on, needs to kind of have more publicity a little bit, is certificate of approval and safety for dams, right? So any person who's going to construct, alter, remove, or operate a non-federal dam must obtain approval from the Tennessee Division of Water Resources dam sections. And then a dam is defined as a structure at least 20 feet high or holds 30 acre feet or more of water at maximum pool. Any dam that meets the size requirements above and is used exclusively as a farm pond, not used by the public, is not regulated by the division and is not required to have approval. So that's where it can kind of be a problem sometimes, is that someone builds it on an agricultural piece of property and they don't get a permit. There's kind of no oversight for it. And so for floodplain purposes, it really should have a floodplain permit, development permit, site plan, and be approved by the local community prior to the commencement of development. And for emergency management purposes, do you have an inventory of public and private dams in your community? Now, the reason why we asked this is when I first started this job, there was a community where an Amishman had built a dam on his property and it breached and 7 homes got flooded. So that's one thing to kind of talk about from an emergency management standpoint, from a floodplain management standpoint, is how many dams do you have in your community? Now, a lot of times they'll say, well, hey, you know what? I'm just going to build it on the farm. I'm not going to hurt anybody. And they can build it as high as they want, as high as they want. And there's really no oversight. So something to kind of talk about to your local stakeholders, to your board of aldermen, to your county commissioners, different things, because if a dam were to breach, how many homes are going to be affected? So this is just kind of an example of a dam failure. This was a picture in Tennessee. So again, you should have a application where all the proper fees are submitted at least 60 days before starting any kind of activity. There's an application for certificate of approval and safety, CN-0821, and then applicants provide information concerning the operator owners, and then a complete description of the dam and reservoir. If construction, alteration, or removal of a dam is involved, the form requires information concerning the design engineer and purpose of such actions. There should be an engineering report, detailed plan, specifications, under the direction of a qualified registered engineer must accompany the application. So again, there's plan review fees based upon how large it is. There's safety inspection fees based upon if it's low, significant, or high hazard. And then applicants can contact the Tennessee Department of Environment and Conservation Division of Water Resources. So again, non-federal dams may also require other environmental permits. So again, this all kind of goes together, especially an aquatic resource alteration permit, stormwater runoff permit, Corps of Engineers 404 permit. Even though the dam may not be subject to the Dam Safety Act, the permits listed on this website are not intended to be all-inclusive lists. If you have any questions and you wish to talk about it, you can go to the environmental permit program that you think, or contact the environmental field office. If you are aware of a dam being constructed, you can reach out to your two BFFs, me and Julius, to talk about the implications for floodplain management is important. So again, let us know. And then other permits. So Julius and I, we have the opportunity, we have the privilege every Monday. We kind of tag team all day and we have office hours, right? And so some of you guys like laugh now when we come out and we have meetings. So we say, if you need anything, just come and see us on Monday during our office hours. So I always know on Monday that I'm going to talk to Julius more than anyone else. And then I get to talk to some of you guys and we get to talk about different projects, permits, development activities, concerns, questions that you have every Monday, which is kind of, I always enjoy it. Every Monday is kind of different. Who we get to talk to, what we get to do. So some of these here that we're going to talk about next has been a result of our office hours. So we're going to talk about that. So there's some other permits to kind of take into consideration when there's development happening in your community. So one that we can think about is asbestos and lead-based paint regulations. So Tennessee has a rule chapter 1200-01-20 asbestos accreditation. So it became a requirement on June 23rd, 2009 for training providers, training courses, firms, and asbestos professionals in Tennessee. So there are some rules and regulations. And then you can click on that link that'll provide the amended state lead-based paint rule from the Tennessee Secretary of State's website. Includes new federal requirements for renovation, repair, and painting. So again, if someone is doing renovation to a structure, let's say it's pre-firm, let's say it's old, and there is maybe asbestos or lead-based paint, or let's say it's a commercial building, they want to make sure that they follow these regulations, because there is rule chapter 1200-1-18 that talks about lead-based paint abatement that became in effect September 26th of 2000. that has different requirements here based upon EPA. So again, the rule outlines the procedures and requirements for accreditation of training programs, certification of professionals, what work practice standards for conducting lead-based paint abatement activities, because it's not something that you can just go in there with a paint scraper, go and get it off the wall, right? You can't do it that way. So there are some standards that have to be done. And then it's to ensure that individuals are properly trained and that they conduct those activities in target housing and child occupied facilities using reliable, effective, safe work practice standards. And again, there are training programs to make sure that people are adhering to required standards, and the regulations establish fees for testing, certification, accreditation, and penalties for noncompliance. So again, there is a 5-day notification to the state prior to the commencement of any kind of risk assessments, inspections, clearances, abatement projects. In addition, Tennessee has a lead-based paint abatement rule that requires the distribution of pre-renovation education prior to the renovations in target housing and child occupied facilities. And then the Renovate Right brochure is the current document used to fulfill pre-renovation education requirements. And then there's also Spanish version available. And so again, you want to make sure that a Tennessee contractor's license is required before bidding or offering a price. Reciprocal agreements do not allow using another state's license, and you must bid and contract in the exact name as licensed. So again, they always talk about when you're getting a contractor to do work, you want to make sure that they're licensed in Tennessee. So please make sure you do your due diligence and look it up before you, or someone in your community has a question that they don't get in trouble, or somebody takes their money and run. So again, we're also going to talk about federal permits, talk about U.S. Army Corps of Engineers 404 permit, and then we're also going to talk about Tennessee Valley Authority, Section 26A permits. So you guys will enjoy this. U.S. Army Corps of Engineers, as you can see this beautiful map here, you kind of see that the state of Tennessee has two. We have the Nashville district and we have the Memphis district that serves the citizens of the great state of Tennessee. And this is a contact information. The Nashville office is downtown on Upper Broadway. So if you ever want to get in there, you have to go through security. It's a whole thing. It's really difficult to get in there very easily. And then the Memphis district is in Memphis. I have not been there, but I'm sure it's a lovely building. When we think about the 404 permit, it's part of the Clean Water Act that establishes a program to regulate the discharge of dredged or fill material into the waters of the United States, including wetlands. Activities in waters of the United States regulated under this program include fill for development, water resource projects such as dams and levees, infrastructure development such as highways and airports, and mining projects. So again, if you're going to be doing any kind of release of dredge or fill material, and it's going to be discharged into the waters of the United States, unless the activity is exempt from the 404 regulations such as certain farming and forestry activities. So I think the one thing that you guys can kind of take away from today is that some of these permits go hand in hand with floodplain management, right? And they have some of the definitions of floodplain. So if the piece of property is in the floodplain, they're putting in fill, they're dredging, they're mining, they're excavating, right? Even though they're getting maybe a 401 or a 404 permit, or they should be considering floodplain management to make sure that what's the impact of flooding on the community, what's the impact to adjacent property owners. So again, even if they're getting these federal permits, it's kind of like that 1980 song, "Don't You Forget About Me." Don't you forget about floodplain management, and making sure that floodplain management regulations and requirements are also being met. So again, here's some permit guidelines. So the basic premise of the program is that no discharge of dredge or fill material is going to be permitted. And if there is a practicable alternative exists, this less damaging to the aquatic environment, or that the nation's waters would be significantly degraded. So in other words, when you apply for a permit, you must first show the steps that have been taken to avoid impacts to wetland streams or other aquatic resources. The potential impacts have been minimized, and net compensation will be provided for all remaining unavoidable impacts. So it kind of reminds me of Executive Order 11988, where if there's a development coming, are there alternative sites where it could be out of the floodplain to minimize flood risk? It's kind of the same sort of thing. So if you're going to be doing this, there has to be some alternatives that are explored, and then trying to minimize the impact. Proposed activities that are regulated through a permit review process. So an individual is required for potentially significant impacts, and then they can be reviewed by the Army Corps of Engineers, and then the state and tribal 404G program. So then also for roadway construction has long been recognized as a potential source of adverse environmental impact upon hydrologic systems. And then to minimize that related impacts, TDOT complies with the criteria set forth by state and federal agencies for jurisdictional waters, and especially the Clean Water Act and the Tennessee Water Control Act and a TVA Act of 1933. So the 404 permit, so the environmental permit section is responsible for obtaining appropriate permits for all TDOT projects that impact federal and state jurisdictional waters from the following agencies. So as you can see here, the Tennessee Department of Environment and Conservation has a general and individual aquatic resource alteration permit. They have the Class 5 underground injection well permits. They have the NPDES construction stormwater permit coverage. So as you can see here, that some of these projects, you may get a permit for a 404, but they're also going to be looking back to say, do you need an ARAP permit? Do you need an underground injection well permit? Do you need an NPDES stormwater permit? How's that going to affect all these? So everything is kind of cumulative, and everything kind of coordinates with one another. And then you also have U.S. Army Corps of Engineers has nationwide and individual Section 404 permits. And then the one that we're going to talk about today, that was kind of a little bit of a surprise to us, was the Tennessee Valley Authority Section 26A permits. So again, with these guidelines where impacts cannot be avoided, a water quality permit application is prepared. It's going to describe the water feature, what's the proposed impact, what's the proposed on-site resource or replacement and or mitigation. And then is there any kind of compensatory mitigation? Is it on-site, off-site, brought by a third party? And then once the permit is reviewed and the project is let for construction, environmental permit section applies for permit modifications requested by the Environmental Technical Office. So again, the environmental permit section is responsible for obtaining appropriate stormwater permits for all TDEC projects that'll disturb 1 acre or more of land during the construction, and then having the National Pollutant Discharge Elimination System permit for discharge of stormwater associated with construction activities. And then EPA has delegated this regulation to TDEC, which issues construction general permit for coverage for projects. So again, there's a lot of moving pieces and parts that when you're doing this to make sure that you have your application together. How are you going to, how is a water feature going to be impacted? What type of mitigation are you going to do? Is it on-site? Is it a third party? What is it? And then making sure that you have all your paperwork together. And then for Region 1 and Region 2, so Knoxville and Chattanooga, is Kristen Taylor. And then for Nashville and Memphis, right now the position is vacant. So they should be filling that soon.
Hey, Amy, before you go on to the TVA 26 section 26A, I'm going to share my screen. So I want to show everybody some additional information. You know, as Amy and I was, reviewing all the slides yesterday, and Amy did a terrific job, gathering all the information for the state and federal permits. We did come across some new information. So I do want to share with you guys. So hopefully everyone can see my screen. as it pertains to Section 404. So just new information that we came across in the process. One of them was about the Section 404 under the Clean Water Act. Just recently, the Army Corps of Engineers and EPA, the Environmental Protection Agency, just proposed a new definition for the United States waterways. So I just want to let you guys know that that proposal took place last December and has been finalized and will go into effect March 20th, 2023. So I'll show you guys what that means in terms of as you do Section 4 for permitting. But as Amy alluded to, if you do go to the EPA website, so hopefully everyone could see my screen, but it kind of talks about, the permit process on the CWA, which is the Clean Water Act Section 404. So everything Amy talked about, regulating the discharge of dredge or fill materials into the waters of the United States. So this definition of waters was what was proposed in December 2022 between the EPA and Army Corps of Engineers, and the new definition was finalized with effective date of March 20th, 2023, as I alluded to before. But if you scroll down on the EPA website, it will give you additional information. As Amy and I, this is not our forte. We do floodplain management. I does it for FEMA. She does it for the state. So working with other federal agencies, this information, we're not the expertise on it. So if you do guys want more information, I'd definitely say reach out to different agencies or go on the EPA website. They do have a really great website, kind of breaks down the 404 program. So if you scroll down, kind of talks about the agencies and roles. So you have different federal agencies that's involved with the Clean Water Act. So you have the Army Corps of Engineers, you have the Memphis, and you have the Nashville District. So they administer the day-to-day of the permitting for the Clean Water Act. So any work that you're doing in the waters of the United States, you have to go through the Army Corps. They do verification of jurisdictional determinations. They develop policy. They enforce the 404 permitting provisions, as well as the EPA. They write the policies, work in collaboration with the Army Corps of Engineers. Review projects. They also enforce it as well too. And as Emmy alluded to, they have worked with TDEC to ensure that 404 compliance is being met. And you may also come across the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Services and the National Marine Fisheries as it pertains to wildlife in those United States waterways. So this is kind of just some background information for you guys so that you guys have that information readily available. In here is a fact sheet. So at the end of the webinar, we'll send out this fact sheet for you guys as it pertains to 404. But this kind of give you a high level overview of what is the 404 as it pertains to the Clean Water Act. Kind of goes down the roles and responsibilities between Army Corps, EPA, U.S. Fish and Wildlife Services, and just some good resources you could rely upon too. And as I alluded to, there's a new revised definition for the waters of the United States. This has gone effective March 20th, 2023. So this is kind of let you know what it looks like. So this is the page. If you go to the EPA website as well, they kind of go over more of the details of what it means. So basically, when going back to from 1977 to 2015, the Army Corps and EPA had similar definition of what the waterways was for the United States. So they kind of put the definitions together on the new 2023. So if you scroll on this page, it will give you more information. There's a fact sheet as it pertains to agricultural communities, landowners, economic analysis of what it means with this new definition. So really great information. I'm not going to go so much into details about it, but I just want to let you guys know it is there for you, and also have the information about what was the proposed definition. And they do have a new fact sheet. So if I go to the fact sheet, this is a new fact sheet that talks about the new revised definitions of the waters of the United States. So if you scroll down, kind of let you know, okay, this is what the definition is. The agency's definition of waters of the United States provides jurisdiction over water bodies that Congress intended to protect under the Clean Water Act, including traditional navigable waters, example, large lakes and rivers, territorial seas, interstate waters. And then if you scroll on a little bit more, you can see the different types of waterways that will fall under Section 404. So you have your areas like the Mississippi River as an example, the Erie Canal, the Great Lakes, your traditional seas like the Atlantic Ocean, Pacific Ocean, interstate waterways like Lake Tahoe, portions of Columbia River, and there's a lot more other areas, but this is kind of giving you guys some examples that falls under the jurisdiction of the new final rule as it pertains to the waterways of the United States. So this all happened. This new revised definition is set to go effect March 20th, 2023. And the other thing to be aware of, there is some exemptions on the 404 as it pertains to things that do not need a permit. So those are the things like if you have ongoing farming, ranching activities that's already in place, those things you don't have to come in to get a permit for, but you still want to notify the local floodplain administrator of any activities in the floodplain. But in terms of coming to get a permit from the Clean Water Act under Section 404, those are some of the things that's exempt. So this has some really great information. And I just want to point you guys out to the EPA website where you could find more information, either between APO or the Army Corps, to get more additional information on Section 404 enforcement. All right, Amy, I'm going to get back to you. So let me stop sharing.
Thank you. That was tremendous. Okay. So as Julius was talking about, all that's coming out in March. So please share that with your colleagues and friends, that'll impact with your elected officials, because it may be something with future development projects that there's questions. So we're going to talk about the last type of permit, the Tennessee Valley Authority, Section 26A. So Tennessee Valley Authority Act of 1933 confers on TVA broad authority related to unified conservation and development of the Tennessee River surrounding areas, and directs that property in the Tennessee Valley Authority's custody be used to promote the Act's purposes. So in particular, there's a Section 26A of the Act that requires approval be obtained prior to the construction, operation, or maintenance of any dam, appurtenant works, or other obstruction affecting navigation, flood control, or public lands or reservations along or in the Tennessee River or any of its tributaries. So I highlighted this in red because a lot of times people want to have development within the river, and they're like, permit, it's under tennis, it's on TVA property, it doesn't matter, right? Or there's been some communities that say, hey, it's within TVA property, I'm a floodplain administrator, I don't want to mess with it, so I'm not going to do it, right? Wrong. So, again, with your flood damage prevention regulations, that you're enforcing those regulations in the incorporated, unincorporated parts of your community, depending upon if you're a city or a county or a town. And again, if there's any kind of development that's going along a floodplain that's designated on your flood insurance rate map, it has to get a floodplain permit. But also, if it's along the TVA property, it should be getting a Section 26A permit. So again, examples of some of these obstructions may include a boat dock, a pier, boat houses, buoys, floats, boat launching ramps, fills, water intakes, devices for discharging effluent, bridges, aerial cables, culverts, pipelines, fish attractors, shoreline stabilization projects, channel excavations, and floating cabins. So yesterday we were working on this and thought, okay, whenever we're working with communities or along the Tennessee River, we need to make sure that they're getting these permits for development. Aside from doing an engineering analysis, like if it's a culvert, if it's a shoreline stabilization project, channel excavations, so on and so forth. But people need to be getting these permits for these type of activities. And then also any person considering constructing, operating, or maintaining any kind of obstruction on a stream in the TVA watershed should review the regulations before doing so. So again, asking for permission is a beautiful thing. And the regulations also apply to certain activities on TVA owned land alongside the reservoirs and to land subject to TVA flow easements.
Hey, Amy, I'm going to jump back in for you 2 seconds. All right. So adding on to what Amy alluded to. So Section 26A of TVA. in Amy and I process of reviewing and getting ready for this presentation, we did not know that this permit existed. So I'm sure a lot of people may not know about this permit requirement through TVA. But doing our research and preparing for this, we learned a lot about it. So that's why we're sharing this information with you guys. Because when we come out and do CAVs, community assistance visits, community assistance contacts, CAVs audits, um, we ask about this permits, but we want to make sure that you guys know what we are talking about, but also we want to make sure that we have provided you guys with the information. So if someone does come in and get a permit, or they bring you a permit, you know what that permit is pertaining to. So the TVA, they on their website, so they really informative website, kind of walks you through the process. So the biggest thing with the TVA pertains to the land rights, as they want to make sure, do you have land rights to build these things in the creek, river, wherever you're going to build it. The biggest things for them is the land rights as it pertains to making sure that you come in for a permit. So they have a whole process. They have a whole flow chart that kind of walks you through the process of how do you get a permit on the 26A. So you have your step one, verify, do you have land rights? Then once you go through that process, then you go step two, you submit your application package to TVA. They do mention they get a lot of permits every year. So they do ask for people patience, and, as they do their best, review it and get back to you for approval. And then once you go through, they go to step three, they verify your request meets the regulations. If it does not meet it, you will not be approved. Then TVA conducts a site visit. So they do come out to your property and do a site visit to verify whether you're going to be building, whether that's a boat ramp, you put in a dock in. The other thing, floating cabins are no longer allowed on TVA reservoirs, effective, I think everything after December 16, 2016. If you had one before that, you kind of set, as long as you meet the health and standard requirements. But anything new floating cabins expansions is prohibited on TVA reservoirs, effective December 16, 2016. So then you go through step five, they conduct environmental program review, and then they issue a shoreline permit. So once you get the permit, that individual comes back to you as local floodplain administrator and say, hey, I got approval from TVA. They've looked at my site. They've given me the green light. Then they come in, they get that permit for you because they're doing work in the special flood hazard area. They still need that local floodplain permit. So whether you get a permit from EPA, permit from Army Corps, TVA, state, federal permit, they still require local floodplain permit. So that doesn't exempt them from getting a local floodplain permit. So I just want to make sure you guys are hearing that clearly, because a lot of times applicants will say, hey, I got this permit, I'm good to go. They still need the local permit from the local floodplain administrator, because it's you guys' jurisdiction, it is your floodplain regulations, and you have to make sure that they get a permit as well too. So this is a really good website, give you different representatives. The other thing that they do have in here is this video. I'm gonna play a little bit section of it, but kind of walks you through the process. So if you have an applicant who has never applied for a TVA permit before, this video is like 10 minutes long. I'm just gonna play like a few segments of it for you guys, so that way you can understand what is the process for applying for a TVA permit. So I'm just gonna play like just a minute of it, so you guys could understand the shoreline construction permitting that you have to go through for TVA.
There's no sound, Julius.
Amy, can you guys hear it?
It's paused, so no.
Okay.
No.
Okay, hold on. All right, so it may not work with, it's kind of hard trying to share a screen and do a webinar. So, but I'll just send out, because of time, I'll just send it out at the end for everybody so that you could take a look at it. So, but yeah, so Amy, I'll let you continue. I'll share the video, I'll send out the video at the end. So,
Okay, awesome. That's great. So let me share here. Okay. So these are some of the application steps as far as making sure you're eligible, completing the form, paying the fee, making a drawing of your project, map of your project, so on and so forth, and then mailing the application package to TVA. So I think that video, for some of you guys that have TVA property, Tennessee River within your jurisdiction, I think that'll really help kind of answer some of these questions and make it a little bit simpler to hear. So there is a contact. There's TVA info at TVA.com. that can help if you have questions. This is a map that kind of shows the lighter color here is our watershed area, and then this darker color is where they have I want to say power plants and different things, or electrical. So put that in there. So do you guys have any questions? So I just wanted to kind of have a giggle because you guys laugh at me about some of the stuff I say. But again, because we are your best floodplain friends, almost every day when I'm out driving in Nashville, I see a BFF license plate. So I just want to take this picture, let you guys know that no matter where I'm at, floodplain always seems to be on the brain. Or there's always something that kind of reminds me of floodplain management. So again, if you guys have questions, our contact emails are on here. We do have Monday office hours. If there's something else that you guys would like to see for a webinar, maybe something else off cycle from our monthly webinars, or something that you guys are burning to have training on, let us know. And we'd be more than happy to assist you. So with that, Julius, do you have any closing comments?
No, terrific job, Amy. And that was a lot. As I alluded to, this is the first time Amy and I have looked at state and federal permits, as it pertains to floodplain management. So we're not the experts on, from either EPA, Army Corps, or TVA, but we do want to let you guys know that this stuff has been in the floodplain. Those are the things that you may come across. So we wanted to spend this month for the webinar kind of just providing that information to you guys. And as you see, Amy and I, we are always learning new stuff. That's the thing about floodplain management. It's forever a growing understanding, trying to get better at this job so that we could provide you guys with the best technical assistance as well as the best customer service. So definitely good job, Amy. Great job on the information. And hopefully, everybody, if you do have questions or follow-ups on anything, we have office hours every Monday. And like I said, the office hours is for you guys as local officials, because it's your regulations, you have to enforce it. But we want to be able to support you guys to make the best decisions, and also to keep your community resilient and reduce your flood risk. So definitely great job, Amy, and hopefully this was beneficial for everybody.
Do we have any questions in the chat?
It's been kind of quiet, Amy. I kind of been monitoring it the whole
Okay.
time. So
Well, they tend to be quiet sometimes. So what, which always scares me. Quiet people scare me. But what we're gonna do, I think, from this training, I was thinking about this last night, Julius, is when we have the Tennessee permitting guide,
Mm.
that what we may do is have a section just on additional permits. We may have some of these listed,
I
like
agree.
TDEC permits, TVA, Army Corps of Engineers, and just kind of have a supplemental for our 2K 23 guide. Hey, do you like that? I'm getting
I
better.
agree. I like that. I agree. I think definitely, and,
Um,
and the permitting guy that you guys have. Like I said, this is your foundation. So you don't if you don't have a process for your community and floodplain management, definitely reference the permitting guide. It is for you guys. It was built for our local officials, so you don't have to reinvent the wheel. You have a SOP on how you're gonna administer your floodplain regulations.
all right. Well, hearing no questions, we will let you guys go.
Amy, we have one question from William out there asking about for the Cumberland River system. Is that correct? He said TVA permits are not required for the Cumberland River system. Is that correct?
Correct. Tennessee River. So, all right. Well, we will let you guys have a beautiful Tuesday. If you get the opportunity to go outside, it's supposed to be really pretty. There is supposed to be some rain this week. Some places are supposed to get 2 to 6 inches, so make sure you're weather aware. And again, if you need anything, let us know. A lot of you guys have reached out, called. You could hear my phone ringing during the presentation. So I have a lot of people to call back. So, and schedule different things. So we'll be working on that today. And again, appreciate you guys. Floodplain management is a hard job, but it's very worthwhile and admirable. So keep up the good work. Thank you.